When we learn to write well, we all learn the same simple rule. Don't use passive voice. By passive voice, I mean a sentence like this. The cat was chased by the dog, used to describe a situation like this. In passive voice, the sentence starts with a patient, with a person or thing being acted upon. The agent, or the actor, appears later in the sentence, if at all. Instead of passive voice, we're told to use active voice, as in, the dog chased the cat, where the agent is mentioned first. Now, instead of This rule is echoed widely across scholarly writing guides, the consensus being that active voice is clear and concise, while passive voice is wordy and complicated. As one guide put it, passive verbs make your writing boring and confuse your reader. Well, given that, there's one place we would never expect to see passive voice: your newsfeed. Boring and confusing language is no way to hook a reader, and it's certainly no way to convey important information as people quickly scroll past. And yet, passive voice headlines aren't at all hard to find. Spend just a little time in your favorite news source and you're sure to see an example. So what gives? Are journalists just a bunch of renegades throwing caution to the wind for the sake of flowery prose? Or might there be some good to passive voice after all? Given that the point of a headline is to convey the news, what makes a headline good or not ultimately depends on how well that news is remembered. With this in mind, we tested how the choice between passive and active voice affects memory for headlines, in particular, for agents and patients introduced within them. To start, we had participants read 20 headlines like this for 5 seconds each. That's a little bit slower than your average scrolling pace, but fast enough to rule out careful memorization. These headlines were pulled from real news sources, with some small tweaks to make them more consistent. And importantly, for every headline, we had both a passive voice version, like this, and an active voice version, like this. And each participant saw only one of these versions. After reading, participants took a quick break with a sorting task, a stand-in for your favorite puzzle game. Then, their minds nice and clear, they read 20 more headlines. And for each, this time, we asked them to say whether they had seen the exact same headline in part 1. Sometimes the headline in part 3 was a perfect match for a headline in part 1, such that the answer was yes. But other times, we made subtle changes to the headline by subbing in a word with a similar semantic meaning. Those changes were made either to the patient of the headline, for instance here, swapping employee with barista, or to the agent of the headline, for instance, swapping monkey with chimp. These 3 options were applied to both passive and active headlines, and whichever voice you saw in part 1 was the same voice that you saw in part 3. Now, along with these main test headlines, we also sprinkled in a few brand new headlines, neither active or passive, just to make sure that folks were really paying attention. So that gave us 4 trial types in total: brand new, perfect match, agent change, and patient change. And what we wanted to know was, well, did they get it right? But more importantly, did voice make a difference? If it's true that passive voice is boring and confusing, then we would expect memory to be worse for passive voice headlines, such that those subtle changes are more likely to be missed. In that case, we would expect our results to look something like this. Now, I want you to keep this asymmetry in mind as I show you what we actually found. First, participants were really good at spotting those brand new headlines. They were also good at recognizing those perfect match headlines, and it didn't make a difference whether that headline was presented in passive or active voice, with practically no difference between them. Now, we knew the change trials would be harder, and as you'll see, participants didn't exactly nail it. But remember, what we really care about is the comparison between passive and active voice, and here, things get interesting. As expected, agent changes were more likely to be noticed when the headline was presented in active voice. But when it came to patient changes, passive voice had the edge. And the passive voice advantage for spotting those patient changes was even stronger than the active voice advantage for spotting agent changes. So all in all, we see that passive voice doesn't make news headlines any less memorable. It simply shifts the spotlight. So lesson learned from journalists: don't bury the lead. This doesn't mean that the golden rule against passive voice is totally unfounded. It's true that passive voice can obscure the agent, especially if it's left out entirely. But information mentioned early in the sentence sticks to better in memory. So even if it is a little wordy, some things are better said in passive voice. Thank you.